which is why people like myself, our work is so much into history, is because you have to put in the foundations. You've got to look. It's like when you come to the peak of a mountain. You are actually in a very good place because you have two vistas that open up to you when you finally reach the plateau. You have the landscape from which you've come, and you can sit there and review it, and you have the landscape of where you're going. And that kind of perspective is very necessary. I've often described it as also being either not too close to a canvas and not being, too far away. And maybe even alternating through your life. Sometimes it's good to be up close to the canvas to see the detail, and sometimes it's very important to pull back. If you stay too close and you only focus on one part, you become a fanatic. Yeah, and you may know it's one part of the story, and that may be very legitimate. But if you only focus on that, sooner or later you're going to become a fanatic. And your very observation will in fact blind you in another way. And if you're too far back, you may see the bigger picture, yes, but you're hopeless at being able to negotiate the intricacy of it all. So it's a constant changing of settings as we go. Being able to review history and then sort of use that knowledge to understand what's happening today. And this is what, of course, people like John Taylor Gatto is another name I would recommend. He deals a lot with the raising of children, the education of children. And most people who've looked into this will always address this concept. I mean, my goodness, I've gone back into even prehistoric times to talk about, 13,000 years ago, various massive traumas to the psyche that I believe have been co-opted by all forms of controllers and tyrants. And probably if we didn't have that diremption in the psyche, we would never have been here. We would have been able to overthrow those people long ago. George Orwell himself said it. If both the past and the external world exist only in the mind, and if the mind itself is controllable, what then? So do you see that the real prison is your own attitude, your own thinking? It's not really so much what others are doing, although the drip feed method is certainly very pernicious. But at any moment of the day or night, you can change. We can change. We can change our settings. We can make that choice. But he goes on to say here that the past is completely eliminated. This is in his utopia, dystopia, you see, in his concept of what's coming. He says the past is completely eliminated. History is revised. Books are destroyed. Without print media, there's no evidence that anything has ever been different. Even keeping diaries is forbidden. People are expected to absorb and accept the new information delivered by the television sets, even if it directly contradicts the news of a month ago. Since it is impossible to prove the contradiction, it is useless to try to resist. And we'll change the slides now so that we can look at another aspect of how this psychic invasion works, because one of the great metaphors of this really, again, is this Trojan horse mentality. How are they insinuating these particular forms of mental viruses into us is a very interesting process. Take a small breather. We're not going to take a break. In the DVD that I did called Subversive Use of Sacred Symbolism, some of the stuff we're talking about is contained, and a little bit more emphasis on some of the techniques that are used in this sorcery. They go by the names of telehypnosis, metacontrast, hemisync, synesthesia, embedding. As I say, the sorcery is very ancient, but it's just been upgraded, updated in modern times. And mention in that DVD, I draw upon the work of several people you should know about. Marshall McLuhan, of course, Jerry Mander, who's very much an advocate of stopping television. I'm not so adamant on that, because again I think it's about attitude, but certainly his theories on the perniciousness of television, and we'll look into that when we meet next time. They're very important. Jean Baudrillard, the French philosopher, who spoke very, very profoundly on the fact that, look, if man does in fact end up inhabiting pretty much a plastic artificial world, then might not he become artificial and plastic in himself, which he referred to as a simulacra. Brian Wilson Keyes wrote the book Age of Manipulation and also Subliminal Suggestion. And Vance Packard, who wrote The Hidden Persuaders, you see, and the Waste Makers. Gene Kilborn, who's written two fantastic books, which we'll refer to extensively through the rest of today's presentation, and Douglas Rushkoff, who also wrote the book Media Virus. So, educate yourselves, educate your children. There is information out there to give scope to what I'm coming at it from my particular point of view. But, I refer you to these great scholars as well, who've done a lot of incredible work. With this exception, what we're dealing with and what we'll finally get to in this series is more of the occult aspects. That's where my forte really is. All of these writers who dealt with this poison, who deal with the media, as you can see from some of the slides and the references I've made so far, they're dealing with what is pretty much known to us all. They're dealing with that was a little bit more understood in today's world. Right? Most of us are up to speed on some of this stuff. What lacks, I feel, is this understanding of the esoteric. They don't talk about secret societies. They mention nothing about conspiracy. They just think it's about rich men having their way with us all. Of course, it's far more deep than that. But again, these are excellent works, especially if you're trying to dialogue with people in general around you, family members and so forth and so on. This is a really good place to start is with this kind of research. Now, Dr. Lechner, in his book Subliminal Advertising and Modern Day Brainwashing, says that armed with limitless resources, advertisers spend millions of dollars on researching exactly how to make you buy their product. Knowing that you crave sex and fear death, Merit would want to know how their cigarettes appeal to you. Schlitz Brewing Company spends $10 million annually to research how you drink beer. Before one can understand the subliminal techniques advertisers use to influence the audience, one must understand the vulnerabilities in humans they tap into. In other words, psychology. The human being is a complex creature. The same complexity that gives us the ability to manipulate objects also makes us vulnerable to manipulation. Once the advertisers find these vulnerabilities, and they've done extensive research, there is little the public can do to defend themselves against the onslaught. Jean Kilbourne, in her book Can't Buy My Love, she says that some of the most talented and creative people in the world are dedicated to this work. Indeed, the most skillful propagandists of our time are not working for dictators. They're certainly not working exclusively for the Democratic Party or the Republican either. They're working for Foote, Cone and Belding, Ogilvy and Mather, and DDB Needham worldwide. They're advertisers, and you can tell that the techniques that they use and the incredibly imaginative minds that they have and the artwork, the skill that they have, the technical skill is brilliant. But it's what they're using it for that really matters. And of course, we find out now that over 75% of the young adults have a television. 98% of all homes have one. The average child watches over 3,000 ads per day. And by age 20, the average person views over 1 million commercials a year. Viewer witnesses will witness 5 acts of violence per hour during prime time. And ads take up 2/3 of newspaper space and 40% of the mail. Almost half the newspapers in the world are published in the United States and Canada. Advertising makes up about 70% of our newspapers and 40% of our mail. 3 years of television per human life. And some people say it's even more, it can be up to 12 years. Channel 1, this is a channel in America, ads cost approximately $200,000 for a captive audience. Companies spend over $200 billion a year on advertising. $13 billion of that is for children. $250,000 to produce the average television ad, and about another $250,000 just to air one. And that alone should tell us something. She goes on to say that today, Time Warner, Sony, Viacom, Disney, Bertelsmann, and News Corporation together control most publishing, music, television, film, and theme park entertainment throughout the developed world. It is estimated that by the end of the millennium, these companies will own 90% of the world's information. But it's, Hal Becker here, he's a media expert and management consultant for the Futures Group. He said during an interview, "I know the secret of making the average American believe anything I want him to. Just let me control the television. You put something on the television and it becomes a reality. If the world outside the TV set contradicts the images, people start trying to change the world to make it like the TV set images. Now you got a thing called reality TV. Yeah, it's reality TV because that has become person's reality.